Welcome back to our tutorials on YouTube. And in this lesson we're going to follow up with a previous tutorial that we had on how to make custom thumbnails. And in this lesson we're going to show you how you can add beautiful graphics to your thumbnails to make them just a little bit more attractive. So let's open up Photoshop and start another new document. And let's start with the recommended dimensions that are posted on YouTube for a 16:9 aspect ratio thumbnail. And that is 640 pixels in width by 360 pixels in height. And for internet use, the resolution we usually have at 72 pixels per inch, and that should be good. So now we have a new document in Photoshop, the recommended size that YouTube calls for. However, when I make a thumbnail for my purposes, I usually like to increase this in size. You've probably noticed that I make a wallpaper and put it up on my computer screen so that it ties into the video itself, the thumbnail. It all kind of works together. I like to actually, when I'm making my thumbnails, make them a higher resolution so that I can use them in different ways in addition to using them as a thumbnail at YouTube. And as long as we've got the aspect ratio correct, then it's YouTube will take the higher resolution one and resize it for the various different ways that it uses it. So it's not a problem. As long as it's in the correct aspect ratio, it will use the higher res version that we create here. So let's resize that, and how we can do that again is the Control-Alt-I to go to the resize tool. And all we need to do, make sure your little link is connected here. If it's like this, then you'll run into problems. But here we want to change the width to 1920. And you'll see that it automatically changes the height so that it's all proportional. And then just hit OK. And now we've resized our document. Let's zoom out a little bit, and that's the Control- key. Hold down your Control and then hit the minus key, and that brings it down so that we can see it on our screen, the full width. And once again, let's go after another image. Go up to File, Open, and pick up another image from our hard drives. And once again, we're going to have to resize. Even though we've made our document much larger, it's still way too big. If we wanted to check out the pixels, Control-Alt-I, right now it's 5,472 pixels, and our screen size is 1920. So we need to resize that. We could take a look at the image and decide whether we want to use the full image, and we probably could get away with that. And so we could just type in, well, let's just type in 2,000 pixels and just hit OK. Now we've resized it, and we can do the Control-A to select it all, copy, and bring it over to our new document, and hit Control-V to paste that in. And now we're ready to add our graphics. And how you do that in Photoshop is just go over to your tool belt over here and hit the little T there to add text. And once you have selected that, you can now go over to your document and just click down once into your image, and you'll see your flashing cursor there, and you can start typing. All right, now there's a couple of things we see right away about this. First of all, the image itself is a little bright. I think we could improve on the image. Let's go over to our layers palette and just make sure that you have your image selected there as the layer that we're going to be working with, and go up to Image and Adjustments. And there's several ways we could do this: brightness and contrast, exposure. Well, let's try the curves. I like the curves. And here you get a representation of your image. And what we want to do is just darken it. Let's just click in the center and put one little node there, and click down about halfway down to the bottom again, and just start dragging this down a little bit. And this will increase the black. You might want to drag down the center as well so that we lose some of that brightness in the sky. Okay, so that fixes the image a little bit, but it's still a little bright here in the top corner. If we were to move our YouTube graphic up here, nobody would be able to read it. And so what we're going to need to do is put kind of a dark layer underneath this. And how we can do that is go over to this little symbol over here in your tool belt. Notice that you can have it either a very sharp cornered rectangle, or you could have a rounded rectangle. You could even use an ellipse or polygon. The one I like is the rounded rectangle. Click on that, and now we can, with our mouse, draw the area that we think that we will need to darken so that our graphics will show up better. And at first it may look like you've just destroyed your image, but that's not a real problem. What we're going to do is go over to our layers palette here and just click down on this new layer that we have just made. And with your mouse held down, just drag this down so that it's below the text. Okay. Now that doesn't look that great, and so what we want to do is make this layer of black more transparent, and we can do that now by just going up to the opacity tool in our layers palette and bring down the opacity so that it's no longer black and we can see some of the photograph behind it. Now, while this might look like it's a good size of text to be able to read when you've got it full screen on the computer, to show up well as a thumb, you might want to have it a little bigger than that. And so what we can do is go over and select our type tool again, and then go to our line of text and hold down your mouse and drag your mouse across to select that graphic. And when it's selected, we can go up and increase the size up here. Let's say maybe make it 110. That's maybe a little better. And then when we've got our select tool, our move tool selected, we can then move that around anywhere we like inside that. Let's say we want to maybe change the color to make the YouTube stand out a little bit. And we can use maybe the YouTube colors. That is the first part of it is black, the U. Well, again, we can go back to our T, our text tool, and just again select only the U part, and let's make that black. And how we can do that is go up to the little color picker up here, click on that once, and you'll get a color picker showing up here. And using the slider tool, we can go all the way down to dark and black, and we'll also have to go in here and pick this little tool and drag it down to black, and now we've got black chosen. And as we look over at our graphic now, we see that the U is black. But then we want to make the tube red, so again we will select that part of our graphic and go up to our color picker and this time choose a red. And I probably want to make it a little darker, and you can keep an eye on your image in real time to see how that looks as you choose various levels of the color here. That's maybe a little dark. Let's move it back up. And then when you got something you like, just hit OK. And to see it, just go up and select your move tool, and there you see your YouTube tips. Okay, but we need to add another line of text. And it's probably a good idea to start another layer of text rather than just try and add to this one. That way you'll be able to format it, size it a little bit easier. So let's go back and click on our text tool again. And once again, you can click really anywhere in the document. It doesn't have to be up there because we can always move it there later. And here we can maybe resize this. We wouldn't necessarily want this to be the same size as the YouTube tips. So let's resize this maybe back down to, say 70, see how that works. And then we can type in more information about our video. And let's say for this one, we want to say how to, and then by going up to our move tool again, we can move it up into we can go back to our text tool and click in the area where we want to hit a return. And probably black is not the best for this, so let's select the whole area again and change our color back to white. And the spacing isn't the best here. It's too far apart. We can fix that. Just again, select the whole area and go up to this little icon up here. And that will open up a little box that allows you to change the spacing. And it's over here. We see what's happening is we chose a font of 70 points, but Photoshop is still spacing it at over 100 points. So let's just, with our mouse, slide that back so that it's closer to the 70 points. You can kind of keep an eye in real time on your graphic to decide where you should stop that spacing. And then when you're happy, oh, did we change it to white? What happened? All right, now it's probably just a little too close to the top graphic. So with our move tool selected, we can just point to it and move it down. Or to do just kind of nudge it a little bit, you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard to get it where you want to go. Now, just to make it stand out a little better, you might want to add a subtle drop shadow on your text. And so let's do that. We can go over to our layer and just kind of double click on your layer. And if it goes blue there, it means that it thinks you want to rename the layer. But just keep clicking on it until you get this dialog box open. And what we want to choose is drop shadow. And then over here, we can make adjustments to our drop shadow. Can kind of keep an eye on how it looks as you adjust it. By default, Photoshop puts a pretty harsh drop shadow on, and it's just too much, really. So I like to bring down the opacity to more like around 10 or 15, 20, something like that. And then it's just a lot more subtle. Let's hit OK. Now, if we want to do the same to YouTube, we could do the same way, or what we can do is just right-click on our layer that we just affected and choose Copy Layer Style, and then we could go down and click on the next layer and right-click on it and choose Paste Layer Style, and it's going to add the same drop shadow to that layer as well. All right, and now if we decide that that's not the best placement for our graphic, we can easily move all three elements at once by selecting them over here in our Layers palette, and just hold down your Control key as you select, and that will allow you to select more than one layer at a time. And also, let's select the rounded black area. And now when we've got all three selected, we can, with our Move tool, just take the whole grouping and bring it over. Okay. Now, what I always like to do is, when I'm working on this, save this, first of all, as a Photoshop file, so that the next time I need to make a thumbnail, I've got a lot of these elements already created, and I don't have to do it every time. The next time I make a thumbnail that has something to do with YouTube tips, I don't have to recreate that again. All I need to do is bring in a new photograph. So if I save this as a Photoshop file, it's going to remember all of these layers that we made and the drop shadows and all those different beautiful, wonderful things, and I don't have to redo that every time. So first of all, we'll save it. Just Control S to save. We'll call this YouTube Thumbs. And that will save that as a layered Photoshop file that I can come back and customize later. But for YouTube, it's going to want a JPEG. And so we need to save it again now as a JPEG. And this time, rather than just do Control S, we'll do Control Shift S, and that'll give us a Save As. And now where it says Save Type As, we can click that and choose to save it as a JPEG instead of a PSD. And this time we should probably give it a more specific name related to this particular thumb that we've just created, and this one is Custom Thumbs, I guess it is. And save that, and again, 9 is the best quality for internet use, and so we can hit OK. And now we've got a beautiful thumbnail for the video, the next video that we upload. And don't worry that this JPEG that we have just saved is a lot larger than what YouTube has recommended for thumbs, because when it comes time to upload or change the custom image that you have maybe already put there, now you're replacing it with maybe some better thumbs, and you're hitting the change image, YouTube will accept that larger file and it will compress it to the size that it needs for the various uses that it has for that custom thumbnail. So as long as it's in the correct aspect ratio, and we've done that for you, it will bring it down and keep all of your graphics just as you have created them in Photoshop. All right, well, I believe that does it to show you how to make custom thumbnails in Photoshop for your YouTube videos.